Hi, everyone. I wanted to give some tips as you're thinking about your summative assessments for possibly the end of an upcoming unit or the end of the year. So, I have some resources to share with you and some examples that Nicole and Alexandra and I worked together on for grade 7 STEM. Okay, so a couple of things to keep in mind is the different language levels of your students. So, what I have is this spreadsheet here that shows what students can do at different levels. So, generally, when you're having them write a test, you'll be looking at the writing. Um, I know a lot of people want to do multiple choice, especially since we're doing online learning right now. It's a little bit easier to grade, but multiple choice is really, really not ideal for language learners. Part of it is that there's a lot of tier two vocabulary words that they have not been explicitly taught. And so they're not easily going to understand all of the questions. It's also typically very language heavy. Maybe not a lot of visual representation. And so they're sort of overloaded with language, a lot of which they can't fully understand. So we're hoping that you can assess them in different modes. And so I want to just show you some examples and some things to keep in mind. So when you're looking at your learners, you can expect that they're going to be generally between 3 and 6. There will also be several at level 2 as well. So you really want to try and differentiate from levels 2 to 6 as best you can. So let me show you an example of what we have done in STEM. So we created for the Unit 1 test. We actually did a 1 dot, a 2 dot, and a 3 dot. So the 1 dot is going to be for your earlier levels, probably like 2 and 3. The 2 dot, 3, 4, 5, or 2, 2, 3, and 4, and then the 3 dot would be for your level 5 and 6. Now, what we realized when we did this was that 3 tests is quite a lot of work, and the difference between the 1 dot and the 3 dot was actually um, not a lot. So we decided moving forward that we'll just do 2 levels of differentiation instead of 3. 3 is always better if you have the time, but like we said in our case, we'd rather sort of streamline the two. Um, so that's what we're doing generally going forward. Okay, in any case, I still want to show you what these different things can look like. So this resource is really great. Just click on the tab for your grade band. This is for 6 through 8. And then what you do is you click on the cell and it'll tell you what students can do at that level. So for example, a level 3 can produce short paragraphs with main ideas and some details. They can compose dialogues or blogs based on personal experiences. Whereas if you move up to, say, a level 5, you'll see something like producing research reports using multiple sources, summarizing conclusions researched from steps in problem solving, or conducting experiments. So you click on these, all of this will be linked to you so you can kind of look at those in your own time. But this is really useful when you're thinking, okay, I have learners that are at this level. What can I expect them to do? This is not overly comprehensive, but it does give you a nice snapshot so you can think about what types of prompts are going to be appropriate for those students. So, so taking a look here now, I don't love looking at it this way. I think it's really useful, but if I'm going to select levels and work on a test, I want to keep flipping back. So I actually created this other spreadsheet where I just copied and pasted the text in there. So again, we did the 3. I'd probably think of these 2 together in building one test and then think of the 3 dot as its own. So here you can see what are the different things that we can expect students to do, and then how can you create questions that sort of go with what you know they can do. So I'll take you through some of the problems and how they look different at each of the levels. And again, I'm linking all this to you, so if you want to look more closely, you're welcome to. And if you have any questions about why we made certain decisions or maybe how we can help you with your exam, please feel free to reach out. Okay, so let's take a look at the Unit 1 test, or sorry, this is all Unit 1 for the 1 dot. Okay, so for the first one, we wanted to test their knowledge of individual, community, population, and ecosystem. So we've given them a word bank, including those words, as well as other words that they've learned in this unit. So we are testing their knowledge of that, but we're giving them a lot of language support as we do it. Whereas a 2 dot, we're still giving them the support. We give them this table. So we have an individual, population, and a community. Can you give us an example so that we can see that you understand those words? It's visually laid out in a way that makes it clear where they write and what they need to write. We, in a previous, in a quiz, we had given it completely open-ended, and many of them actually really struggled on it. So this, we were trying to think of ways for how to better support those kids, and we found out this was much more successful. Okay, we also have as well, let's see, my screen might be a little bit yellow, so let me quit that there. Okay, okay, so then for the 3 dot, we found these students were able to answer this question without it being modified in the quiz version, and they did successful. They were successful as well on this unit test. So here we just say, give an example of each of these, and then they just do like a sentence or few as a response. Okay, so we're looking at the same information. Does the student know what an individual, a population, and a community means? Just with different supports. Okay, another example is here. Pick any 2 ecosystems and compare them using the Venn diagram below. Okay, so we wanted them to, we gave them sort of like a check to consider the following. So what do they look like, feel like? Can you tell us 4 or more plants, 4 or more animals? Where is it located? And anything else they might want to include. Okay, we didn't ask them to write a paragraph here, just fill out the Venn diagram. On a 2 dot, we also gave the support of the Venn diagram, but then we also gave them the checklist, which we'll find also in the 3 dot. What are the questions? What does it look and feel like? How are they similar? How are they different? What are some examples of plants and animals? Okay, and then down here, we give them sentence stems and frames in order for them to write a paragraph. So they're given a lot of support here, questions and prompts, a way to organize the information, sentence stems and frames, and then a space to write the paragraph. Now, if you go to the 3 dot, those students just do not need as much support. They are able to answer that by having less support. So we've given them sort of the same part is here, but without the added support, the added scaffolds here. So they're asked to write a paragraph using that same information. Now, I will say that we've decided to give sentence stems and frames to all students as much as possible. So moving forward, when we give this test again next year, if we stick with the same curriculum, I will add in sentence frames as well. I found with all language learners, even at the higher levels, it helps them focus on what they need to make sure they answer in a question. And especially if they're attentive to language, it can really help teach them different academic ways of responding. So I find it's not an over support. If they don't need it, they can ignore it. And even if they don't think they need it, they still might look at it and maybe see a new way to answer something. So those are some examples. All of the tests also are quite visual. We try to put graphs and diagrams and pictures. So that's great for students at all levels, especially at the lower levels, but for all of them, especially pretty much all of our students are language learners. So, okay, so you can see the examples. The tests look very different, and some are exactly the same. This last one, for example, writing a short paragraph, we've asked all of them to do that. Again, we expect that students are able to write paragraphs at that level. So I think that was at the level 3. Producing short paragraphs with main ideas and some details. So we can expect all of the students to do that. The quality of them, of course, will vary. Okay, so another thing I want to talk about is a study guide. Now, when students are learning a lot of information and they have a test coming up, especially the lower language learners, they are just overwhelmed with information and language. So if the test is very open, it's too much. They need it more focused. So we found it's critically important to give a study guide so that you can narrow down what it is they need to focus on. Your study guide probably will still include more than will actually be on the test. That's okay, but it helps. Instead of having like 7 different lessons and all these resources to pull from, we streamline it kind of in one place, and link out to the places where they can get more information. So here is a study guide from Unit 2 that the students are actually currently working on. And what we have here are links. So for example, so we want them to fill in the Venn diagram. So what does a Venn diagram look like? Okay, language learners, all students need to see examples, and especially language learners as well. So this is just linking to an example they can look to. In other cases, I'm linking out to, I really like Oxford Learner's Dictionary, so linking to the information. Now they've got these words in Quizlet as well, but it's good for them to see it maybe from a different source, or when you're working with tier 2 words or some other words that maybe weren't explicitly taught, then they can either be reminded of it or learn it as they're going through the document. So a lot of hyperlinks in there for that. Giving them options, different visual representations. And again, I mentioned the sentence starters for all students. So we've gone ahead and done that. So sentence starters are actually relatively easy. I can help you if you're not sure if you're doing it quite right. But basically, just think of it as you're giving the students a question and they simply need to flip that into a sentence, and so you're starting them out on that. You're not actually giving them any information to answer the question. You're just giving them the first words to get started. So not all students will use this, but we find even the students we won't think need it, sometimes they lean on that support too, and we think that's okay. So for example, here, how is Earth like a spaceship in terms of natural resources, and explain. So you simply just flip it and say, in terms of natural resources, Earth is much like a spaceship because, and then they have to finish from there. Another example using more like frames, like in question 7 here. So what are the natural resources you learned about in this unit so far? Explain what they are and how they are formed. Now, when we give this question to students, often they are going to talk about one resource and move on, and they may say very little about it. So when you provide the frames, you're encouraging them to be more thorough. So for example, we say, one resource I learned about was blank. It is blank, so telling me more about it, and then it is formed by, and they can get specific into the specific plate tectonics or whatever natural phenomena made that happen. And then we say another resource I learned about was, so this prompts them to go on to the next one and not simply stop there. The dot 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 indicates they should probably keep going as well. You could also just keep stacking the sentence frames on top of each other. Notice we do it in the gray text, so students are very familiar with that. Anytime they see the gray text, it is just there as a support if they need it. Yeah, so I think if you can use this document as a place to get started, it can be really, really helpful. It is not overly comprehensive, but it provides a nice window into what students can do at that level. So yeah, please feel free to reach out. I'm just threw this page up here to kind of give to you guys. I started a video and decided to make another one, so I'll change that out with this one. And then here we have the documents that I was just sharing with you, and then we'll be working over the coming weeks, adding some additional things for you as well. So please reach out. You can contact whatever teacher is at your grade level to help with you, or if you're an 11 or 12, just reach out to me and we would be happy to look over if you have any assessments that you've written that are coming up and you want us to maybe give you some suggestions for a differentiated test as well to give with it, or some supports right within your test that you have. So please feel free to reach out. Thanks.